believe that the Bible is a reliable historical document, such that we can say that every letter and every word of the Bible is certainly a reliable testimony of history?
There's been lots of interesting research coming out in the last couple of years when you look at what the contents of the Gospels are. There's a beautiful word called verisimilitude. Verisimilitude means that what you find in the New Testament is, and we look at it now, if we were to travel back and you take all the other kinds of history, archaeology, looking at all the other documents that have got nothing to do with Christianity,
yes,
what you find in the Gospels is exactly what you would expect. So they weren't made up, they weren't fabricated at a much later date.
To some extent, I would agree with you to some extent. So now we're coming back to our reliability and historicity of the Bible. You have a problem with the Bible because actually, as Mohammed says, after the 9th century, 96% of the manuscripts, or 94% of the manuscripts are basically produced at that time.
Yeah, but not all of them are, and there are quite a number. If it's 96, then it's 4%, 6% that go before that. And there's no contradiction because you used the word contradiction. Right? Scribal errors don't imply contradiction. Any ancient document, in fact, every ancient document, including the Sana manuscripts, the Tashkent, all the oldest Quranic manuscripts we have, they've got scribal errors in them as well.
Despite the fact that the hieroglyphic language is a dead language, and that, as you and I know, in the 19th century the Rosetta Stone came out. The Rosetta Stone was the stone was the way by which and through which people could then decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So it couldn't be the case. So this is two things. It couldn't be the case that the Prophet Muhammad, he couldn't have known that information unless he had access to the Rosetta Stone. Okay. So at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, 7th century Arabia, there was no access to what? There was no access to the Rosetta Stone, there was therefore no access to the hieroglyphs. So he couldn't have known that at the time of Joseph, that it was king, and the Quran refers to king, and at the time of Moses it would be Pharaoh. A true religion, ultimately true. Why does it convince you?
Okay,
so is Christianity true, basically? It could be the title of this. Or something similar to that.
Yeah.
Or can Christianity be disproven? Or something like that.
Right, I'm quite happy to go with what would be required to convince someone of the truth of certain claims.
Okay, yeah. So let's be clear about the crux of Christian belief is belief in the Trinity, belief in Jesus as being God, belief in the prophets that came before the Bible, etc.
The Bible is a reliable eyewitness of history.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now, so let's get started with that then.
Yeah.
So, let me ask you a straightforward, honest question.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your name again?
David.
So, David, what convinces you for Christianity?
Well, initially, I think even for the authors of the New Testament, they were experiential Trinitarians. They'd been on the Mount of Transfiguration. They'd seen the glory come out of Jesus. They'd experienced him after the resurrection. So they were experiential Trinitarians. And for me personally, I had an experience. It wasn't something I was looking for. It wasn't something I expected. But it happened. So there's that experiential aspect to it.
But when you say that,
I'm fully aware that that's not proof.
No, I'm not trying to say that.
Part of
I wanted to ask you, when you say they were experiential Trinitarians, what you intended by that?
Well, they'd seen Jesus resurrected. Jesus said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father."
Okay, so they've experienced it themselves.
Yeah. So they received.
And you're saying that was the case for the authors of the Gospels.
All the people that were closely associated with them, like Mark, for example, recorded Peter's.
So what did they witness? What's your take? What did they witness?
John, Peter, when they were with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, when Elijah and Moses appeared, they saw the bright light, they heard God's word, God speak.
So are you talking about, because you talk about Trinitarianism, yeah? You said that they were experiential Trinitarians.
Yeah.
So what did you intend by that exactly? I'm just trying to understand what you mean. The Trinity is the idea that the Father is God, the Holy Spirit is God, Jesus is God, and the Holy Spirit is God, and all three are one. Yeah. So when you use the word experiential, am I to assume here that they use their five senses in an empirical way to deduce conclusions?
They'd heard God speak. They'd seen Jesus transfigured. They'd been infilled with the Holy Spirit, Pentecost.
Okay, so
in that sense, they were experiential.
Okay, so here, I think there's a bit of a logical leap that you've taken here, because me and you both agree. I'm a Muslim, so both me and you agree of the historicity of Jesus Christ as a character. Both me and you believe in God. So we believe that God exists. We believe that Jesus Christ exists. The question is now, what is this suggesting us that these individuals had a connection, that the Father is God, the Holy Spirit is God, and the Holy Spirit and Jesus is God. All three are one. Where do you see that they've come to that conclusion, and how have they come to that conclusion? With what proof?
Well, I think as a Christian, you take the whole testimony of the New Testament, going back into the Old Testament, Isaiah 9, to us a child will be given, he will be called mighty God. So this is where it's coming from. This is who we believe Jesus is.
So repeat that one more time.
Distracted by the man on the ladder. Fundamentally, if we're going to move this conversation away from the Trinity, where do I get my understanding of the Trinity from? That's from.
How do you know that the Trinity exists, or how do you know it's a true concept? Why do you believe it?
You get that from the scriptures. The consistent testimony of the New Testament is that Jesus Christ was God incarnate. He had existed from the beginning. He'll be there at the end. References to Daniel 7, and
so you get it from the scriptures. So then, because you say you got them from the scriptures, now it begs the question really: are the scriptures that we're using? And obviously, we've heard this question before. But are the biblical scriptures, are they a trustworthy historical reference point, such that we would be able to derive these conclusions of the Trinity, etc.? That's the first question. The second question would be: is there and could there be a difference between what some of the narrators of the New Testament, like Paul, for example, who had his letters, for example, the Corinthians, he wrote letters to Corinthians, etc. Letters to Paul, other people like him, are they basically narrating his viewpoint, i.e. Jesus' viewpoint, or are they basically coming up with an innovative doctrine? That's the secondary question. So let's start with the first question. Do you believe that the Bible is a reliable historical document, such that we can say that every letter and every word of the Bible is certainly a reliable testimony of history?
Well, I think there's been lots of interesting research coming out in the last couple of years when you look at what the contents of the Gospels are. There's a beautiful word called verisimilitude. Verisimilitude means that what you find in the New Testament is, and we look at it now, if we were to travel back and you take all the other kinds of history, archaeology, looking at all the other documents that have got nothing to do with Christianity, what you find in the Gospels is exactly what you would expect. So they weren't made up, they weren't fabricated at a much later date.
To some extent, I would agree with you to some extent. I'm not saying that there isn't correlations between the biblical narrative and other forms of history. Because I think, for example, if you look at ancient Egyptian history, and you look at the stelas that were sort of codified or entrenched by the pharaohs of Egypt, you'll find that there are references, for example, to the children of Israel. This is known to Egyptologists. So, and historians, likewise, when it comes to the narrative or the historicity of Jesus Christ himself, they do accept, for the most part, even if they are if they're not Christian, if they're atheistic or whatever, they do accept the historicity of Jesus Christ as a historical figure. So if that's what you're saying, I accept. But if what you're saying is that every word, and this is what it's the phraseology I use, the terminology I use, that every word of the Bible, as we know it today, is historically verifiable, I would say this is, to make a claim that it is, academically, would be a very difficult claim to make. Would you agree?
Well, I think, yeah, this is a point where you can start playing with words and stuff, but you have to, if you want to be rational and reasonable about it, the Bible makes an awful lot of claims historically, and as far as I'm aware, none of the claims that it's made has been disproved by archaeology.
Okay, I'll give you one example. So for example, we know from history, we know this is a very common example that I'm looking forward to, and this is something that was written by popular people, most notably in the 20th century by Maurice Bucquois, who wrote Babylon Science. He's an Egyptologist, he went to Egypt. He had a unique Maurice Bucquois. He went to Egypt, he had an experience with Ramses II. He wrote a book about it, right? He was originally from a neutral perspective. And what he said was that he talked about Ramses II having a strong parallel with, from a biblical perspective, the era of, he believes, Moses, and so the time of Pharaoh, that's referenced in the Bible. The Bible says very clearly that the body of Pharaoh will not be preserved. Do you understand? The Quran, on the other hand, says that the body of Pharaoh will be preserved. So now you have a contradiction between the Quran and the Bible.
That's interesting, because if you take Ramesses as the Pharaoh of the Exodus, then none of the archaeological evidence lines up. I think what happens in you do have some scribal editing in.
So you've made a claim. You say that none of the archaeological findings line up.
That's archaeology.
What is your what do you mean by
currently you have two schools of thought. You have the standard chronology that most archaeologists subscribe to, which has Ramesses, because it's mentioned in the Old Testament. He must be the Pharaoh of the Exodus. However, you don't find.
By the way, I'm not positing that he's definitely. My position is not he's definitely. What I'm saying is that we can't dismiss it as a possible possibility.
Sorry, I've got books in my bag, so I'm just.
Do you mind if I just want to put another point, because I just want to make another point to you now. Another point.
That's right.
Another point. I look like a real hood boy right now. Another point is that I was gonna make, right? Was that this is a very commonly repeated one as well. That if we look into the biblical discourse, when you see the interaction between Joseph and what the Bible calls the Pharaoh, or the leader of Egypt at the time calls him the Pharaoh. Now we know that Pharaoh, even if you look, even if you go and consult any sort of encyclopedia, go on Google, right? Encyclopedia. We know that the word Pharaoh comes from para. And para basically means the house. And Pharaoh was used, it was used in a certain time period. Yes, if we say that, if we take the time period of Moses, as let's say Ramses II, even if it's not, if it's Ramses I or any within that time period, then yes, it makes sense to call Pharaoh. But at the time of Joseph, which is a completely different historical time period, we know from the archaeological, from history really, that it wasn't referred to, or the leader of Egypt at that time was not referred to as Pharaoh. Yet the Bible refers to him as Pharaoh. The Quran refers to him as king, and that's an important point. And that's another point that most people have made in his book. So he said, just to finish up. He said that it's very.
I can clarify that.
Yeah, that's cool. But I'm just saying that. So you can say it's describable. The accuracies of history. That when it comes to the Quranic discourse, despite the fact, by the way, and I'll make this a very important point, despite the fact that the hieroglyphic language is a dead language, and that, as you and I know, in the 19th century, the Rosetta Stone came out. The Rosetta Stone was the stone which was the way by which and through which people could then decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So it couldn't be the case. So this does two things. It couldn't be the case that Prophet Muhammad, he couldn't have known that information unless he had access to the Rosetta Stone. Okay, which he didn't have access to. So at the time of Prophet Muhammad, 7th century Arabia, there was no access to what? There was no access to the Rosetta Stone. There was therefore no access to the hieroglyphs. So he couldn't have known that at the time of Joseph, that it was king, as the Quran refers to king, and at the time of Moses it would be Fir'aun, which is historically accurate, and the Bible is not like that. So there's two things here. One with Ramses II. If we take it, I'm not saying 100% sure that Ramses II is another thing is the distinction between king and pharaoh. So what you're gonna
I know pharaoh is a certain type of king. For me
it's not really, because as I say before, linguistically speaking, right? Okay, so if we use the linguistics.
But nevertheless, right,
so what's more accurate, calling him king or pharaoh?
I don't know.
Historically. Because you made the claim before, let's be honest, you made the claim before. I'm sorry to you.
No, that means you're implying dishonesty. When you say let's be honest.
No. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll take it back. Let's be.
No, I can't comment on Malik, King, and Quran because I haven't looked into that. But what I do know, and what has been scholarly discussed, and there's evidence for it, and it's an accepted thing that happened, is that there has been scribal editing in the Old Testament. There's plenty of examples of it. I don't remember. So that, for example, in this situation we were talking about, where Genesis refers to the city of Ramses, right? That is scribal editing. It's scribal editing, because underneath the city of Ramses is the city of Avaris, and Avaris has got plenty of evidence of Semitic people. So the misconception, if you like, arose that Ramesses, Prince of Egypt, all that stuff. Ramesses is. And
I said to you before that we don't take that as a. It's not an article of faith for me to believe that that's the case. But I'm saying that's a theory that at the moment I don't think is necessarily falsifiable.
So what I'm saying is, people understand that the leader of Egypt was Pharaoh, so we don't know if that is one of the things that.
I wanted to ask him, because you know this Kalam guy, he's actually he's into Egyptology. I wanted to ask him one piece of information. When it comes to ask him, but what? Now I'll tell you something. Having said this, there's two things that we talked about.
We can go back to the New Testament.
No, but this is something that you've just mentioned here, which I think is really important, and I'm going to push on it now a little bit. Because before you made the claim, is that Kalam there? No, it's not Kalam. Sorry. Before you made the claim that the Bible is basically in line with what we know of history and archaeology. The original question I posed to you was that, is the Bible reliable? As a historical document? And what you said is that it was, and I even mentioned that it's on the camera that, would you say it's word for word reliable? But what you just mentioned here is that there was scribal editing. Now, and I mentioned this person because this person, the scholar, is someone who is well known as a scholar, who's Bar Ahmed, right? So if you look at the works of Bar Ahmed and his speeches and his debates, you will come to the conclusion that Bar Ahmed, he mentions that 96%, these are his words in his debate with James White. He said 96% of the Bible, or basically 96% of the manuscripts that are used to derive what the Bible is comes after the 9th century. So only a very small minority of the actual manuscripts that we have, are basically before the 9th century. That's an incredible number. We know he also makes a claim, and we can trace from history, at the time of John Mill, not John Stuart Mill, but in the 1500s, we had John Mill, who basically, we knew that in Oxford, in this country, that there were, basically, he done a study on 100 parts of the 100 verses of the Bible, and he saw 30,000 discrepancies, all of which contradict each other, which is an important point. Muhammad therefore makes a claim. This is not my claim because I'm not a scholar of the manuscripts. He is, so I'm going to tell you what he said. He says that there are more variants in the Bible, in the New Testament in particular, than there are words in it.
Yeah, 400,000.
Yeah. So it's very difficult for you to conclude, I would say, that the Bible is a word for word, historically valid document when you have such inconsistencies, some of which are incredibly contradictory in their nature. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do have a quote from Bart Ehrman himself.
Yes.
Which,
by the way, sorry, Kalam, do you remember that stela, the one that we were discussing before about the Israel thing?
Merempata.
What's it called?
Merempata.
Merempata.
Yeah.
When was that? When was it?
Roughly 1200.
Okay, so Merempata and Ramses II. What are we talking here?
Ramses II.
Yeah, Ramses
1200.
Ramses is like 1250.
Yeah.
So same time, yeah? Okay, so this, I know that Kalam is very into, just to go back to one thing, I just wanted to make one because the point you said is that there's absolutely no archaeological or historical evidence to suggest that basically Moses was around at the same time as Ramses II. He's not the pharaoh.
Yeah.
But this, the Merempata stela, which some scholars, or I say the majority of scholars of Egyptology, they say that basically this is, it references Israel in the 27th line, In the 27th line it references Israel. So some of the Egyptologists, so now we have archaeological and historical evidence to suggest that actually Ramses II and Moses existed at the same time.
No, it can't be, because
Why is the children of Israel?
Because the children of Israel, they would have, it's referring to them as a nation outside of Egypt. So that means, well, the house of means they weren't the house of Israel while they were slaves.
They're a nation inside of Egypt. They're a nation. The Jewish people are distinct from Egyptians.
It's referring to an entity outside of Egypt. I'm sure.
Does it say
it's referring to an entity outside of Egypt.
Yeah. Well, can you, if you get the transcript, I'll show you.
I don't want to get involved in your discussion. But Merempata is another pharaoh that's after Ramesses. And it's talking about, if it is Israel, I'm not saying that it is Israel. It's talking about nations outside that they had to come from.
So that means
Merempata
isn't at that time.
Interesting, If he comes after a pharaoh and he's talking about them after, that's after the Exodus because they left Egypt.
Before
they got so that's an important point. So if Merempata was after Ramses II, if Merempata was after Ramses II and he's talking about nations that are outside, then that would suggest that Ramses II, he is the, because there's the Exodus, so they left Egypt. So it makes sense that they're outside now, and that he's referencing them.
No, I think just go and check in on that.
Right? Are you sure that he's outside? Merempata is after.
Merempata's father is Ramesses II.
Okay.
So his father is Ramesses II.
Okay.
So
either way, it's fine.
Because remember, they were in the wilderness for 40 years. So that would have been before Ramesses.
Look into that. It's not a problem. But either way, I'm saying to you that at the same time, the key point here to know is that there is archaeological evidence here, the stela, the Merempata stela, that is referencing Israel at a similar time of Ramses II. So it's not a ridiculous historical proposition to say that Ramses II was the pharaoh of the Old Testament. I'm not saying, by the way, as I said before, I'm not sticking to that as a religious doctrine. Like, I'm not saying that I must be right, but if this is true, which there's a big chance it might be, then in that case, there's two things that you've got a problem with. You've got a problem with the preservation of Ramses II, and his lungs are burst because he's been drowned, and that goes in line with the Old Testament narrative. And you've got the problem also with this whole thing of the pharaoh king distinction, which you haven't been able to clarify. But now we have an even bigger problem.
Yeah, I don't have that knowledge, so I can't clarify.
No, that's cool. The bigger problem now, which is even bigger, is that you have So we talk about. So now we're coming back to our reliability and historicity of the Bible. You have a problem with the Bible because actually, as Bar says, after the 9th century, 96% of the manuscripts, or 94%, 90% of the manuscripts are basically produced at that time.
Yeah, but not all of them are, and there are quite a number. If it's 96, then it's 4%, 6% that go before that. And there's no contradiction between, because you use the word contradiction. Right? Scribal errors don't imply contradiction. Any ancient document, in fact, every ancient document, including the Sana manuscripts, the Tashkent, all the oldest Quranic manuscripts you have, they've got scribal errors in them as well.
Okay, can you give me an example? Because that will come to that. And do you know what? Leave that question. I don't mind you asking that. I'm very happy to answer that question. But let's deal with one thing at a time. Because if you're saying that you derive your belief in the Trinity from the Bible, and the Bible itself has scriptural contradictions, that you have manuscripts that are basically contradicting each other in word and meaning, then that would mean there's a contradiction in believing in that. That's a reference point in the Bible.
The quote I was looking for, which I can't find, because I don't want to get my phone wet. Bart Ehrman says in a scholarly work that he published with
Misquote Jesus.
The one he did with Bruce Metzger. Misquoting Jesus is a popular one, but the one he did with Bruce Metzger, at the back of that, if you wanted to check where it is, he says that the integrity of the New Testament isn't in question. I forget the exact words. So he does say different things to different audiences.
Now, to be honest with you, I don't agree with that.
Okay, if you hold this, I can find the quote, then we can deal with it.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you look at his works holistically, I mean, I don't think you will find someone who's honest, like an honest academic or researcher, that will not say that either Bruce Metzger or, because he wrote a book, The Corruption and Restoration of the Bible, either Bruce Metzger or Bar Ehrman, who's a student, and he obviously produced a couple of works that we know of, that either of them two don't believe a corruption of the New Testament. If you don't say that they believe that, then that would be so easy to disprove. Anyone could just write Bruce Metzger on YouTube and see what he's saying. It's so easy to disprove.
So I think what we have to do here is define what you mean by corruption.
Okay, what he means by it. So the first thing is that he says.
Are you saying by corruption that what was originally written we no longer have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what we're saying is that first of all you have two different levels of corruption. The first level of, you could say problem. You could say the first problem is that you had Jesus Christ himself speaking and people around him taking notes. Yeah. All right. The first, as we know, the Synoptic Bible is about what, 70 to 90 years after his death. After you would say his death, I would say his departure from death. So the Synoptic Bible, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, not John. John is not part of the Synoptic Bible. And K source, M source, L source. That part of the Synoptic Bible is the earliest manuscript of the New Testament corpus that we have. That was, first of all, it was written a very long time after Jesus Christ.
Okay, define what you mean by a very long time after Jesus.
Well, the Synoptic Bible, anytime between what, 70 to 90 years. Yeah?
Okay, well, I would say that what the synoptics say, they don't mention the destruction of the temple, and especially for those of the Gospels that were written to Jewish audiences, right, that would be huge. The book of Hebrews doesn't mention the destruction of the temple, which it definitely would if it was written after that. So I would tend to go with a huge number of scholars that would place the writing of pretty much all of the New Testament before 70.
Okay, let's say 50. I don't mind. It happened before or after.
Yeah,
fine.
I mean,
so you have that.
There's certain things that are not mentioned in the Gospels that happen after, for example, the death of Paul. That's not mentioned. So that replaces those writings that mention Paul, but then not his death, before his death, which was in 64. So now we're getting back to before 64.
I'm with you, but like I wanted to say to you,
look up there in the camera.
is that
So what you were doing there was making wild claims.
That's not wild claim. It was actually the claim of the scholars. What you made in the beginning was a wild claim. Because in the beginning of your conversation, you made two wild claims which have been discredited. The first wild claim you made was that the Bible is word for word, as you said.
I never used the word for word.
I said that, and you agreed to it. And it's on the tape, so you can look at it. I said word for word.
No, I didn't say that, and I didn't.
You did agree to it. I promise you.
I might have smiled, but that wasn't agreement.
You agreed. After you agreed to the word for word,
I think you'll find that he's not. Not
okay, rewind it.
That's not what I believe. So
rewind it to the beginning.
That's
Okay,
not
that's fine.
what I believe. So I wouldn't affirm that.
So you don't believe that the Bible word for word is restored, or is actually the word of Jesus Christ of God?
Yeah, I do, but no.
It's not the word. Yes, it is, or is it not?
It is. It's inspired. The original,
is the Bible word for word the word of God?
The original autographs are the inspired.
If I pick up a King James version from Waterstones today and I open it up, is that word for word the word of God?
Now we're not talking. See, I just said the original autographs. That's what the.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
What do you mean by it? Can you explain to us what you mean?
The original thing that Mark wrote, that Matthew wrote, that Luke wrote, that John wrote, the original.
That's not. Okay, so
those are called the original autographs. Okay. And those.
Are they word for word?
They were the original writings, so they were word for word.
But the issue is that what is Matthew? What is Mark? What is Luke? What is John? That's the issue. You see one thing. Yeah. You couldn't say that I believe that Mark is Matthew. Matthew is word for word the word of God, because actually we don't even know.
We don't have the original.
That's the problem. Okay, so how can you believe in something you don't have?
Well, we don't have the original Quran, but yet.
Okay, now we're coming to that.
I mean, you see,
let's deal with one thing at a time.
Equal scales.
Okay, I'll come to you. Can you
that means neither of us can base our faith on
I believe
scriptures.
My
we don't have the original.
My claim is that the Quran is word for word, letter for letter, the word of God, and it's preserved. That's my claim.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna stick to that. I'm saying to you, let's deal with the Bible first, because you haven't been able to prove that you've actually said you've made two.
At the beginning of the conversation, we said that we're not going to use the word prove, right? You said we're going to use the word convince.
Okay,
because
fine. Let's can't. I don't mind. Whatever terminology you want.
This isn't mathematics, so
I don't mind.
Proving anything.
Whatever you want. Yeah. I'm just saying to you, there's a big contradiction in saying I believe that the Bible is word for word the word of God. So if I go to the Waterstones right now and get a King James version of the Bible, that you believe that actually every single word is the word of God, and at the same time saying I don't have the original. So what do you believe in then?
The King James version was based on, I think, what that Erasmus did, and he had 7 manuscripts. Since then we found so many more. And I think this is part of what Mohammed said. There's not a single doctrine of Christianity that is contradicted or. I can find the quote for you on the screen here.
No. You know, I tell you something else.
There was actually someone.
I think this is very selective. No, you can say that he said that. That's not what he. The thing is, what I'm saying to you.
Why would he say that if that's not what he?
I'm just hoping that nothing happens to it.
There's a debate between, and I made this point on my channel as well. I've got a channel called Sirat Education. Yeah, you can check out it called. It's called Sirat Education.
Maybe I've seen.
But no, there's another debate between Bart Ehrman and James White. In that debate between Bart Ehrman,
I might have seen it.
yeah, okay. So in that debate, because the claim is this. Okay, a lot of Christians have a counterclaim. I'll tell you what the counterclaim is. James White's counterclaim is as follows. First of all, Bart Ehrman is James White. Any Christian apologist with any understanding of the scriptures, like yourself, right, could not say that the Bible is word for word. The word is preserved. You couldn't say that. There is an issue of preservation of the New Testament. That's well known. Okay. Now the counterclaim is
the thing is, there's an issue of preservation with every single.
I don't agree. I don't agree with you. But we'll come to that in a second. We'll come to the Quran in a second. I have no problem.
I'm not talking about the Quran or whatever.
You've made a claim, but
every single ancient document.
Okay, but how do you these are words are generic. Have you been able to analyze every single ancient document?
I have,
historically.
but
so how can you make a claim?
Well, for example, if you take all the ancient works, Plato, Homer's Iliad, all.
But you're using, if you examples. I'm not saying that there's no issues with preservation of those documents. I'm saying the Quran. My point is that Quran is preserved. Okay? And I can say to you, I will do that for you today. I'll prove it to you. I'll give you evidences which you can either be convinced of or not convinced.
You're welcome to assert that. But just for the purposes of what I'm claiming and why I'm convinced by what there is, whatever its state of preservation, is that if you took all the manuscripts that we base the Greek classics on, that everybody accepts, right, they are on average over 1,000 years after the original. Some of them up to 1,500 years. 800 years, 400 years, 1,500 years.
Yeah.
If you had to stack them all up, you'd have a stack about 4 foot high. If you had to stack all the text we have of the New Testament, you would have a stack somewhere.
So that's counter to your claim. So that's not helping prove that the Bible is So what does that prove?
I'm saying that we have a wealth of riches in terms of.
That's contradicting itself. It's not wealth. It's actually destructing itself. It's destroying Christianity from within.
The more evidence we have.
Yes, the more evidence that you have that's contradictory to each other, then there's more problem you have.
Your understanding of contradictory is
what's a contradiction to?
Right. Something, for example, if I say my name is David, and then the next time you say my name is Mark.
Okay, that's the kind of contradiction. That's the kind of contradiction you'll find within those manuscripts. The more manuscripts you find, the more contradictions you get.
I would disagree with you.
How would you disagree with that? That's what every scholar knows.
Every scholar. Well,
who knows?
Dr. Dan Wallace doesn't agree with that, and he's the world's leading.
Do you mind if I just say something? Right?
You said
No, you said so. I've given you time. Maybe I've been more. I apologize. Genuinely, but like I think that you're an intelligent person. So I don't want to emotionalize you. I just want to be honest with you. I say to you that your rationale here is starting to break apart, right? Because you're saying that you have so many manuscripts. I agree with you. There are manuscripts, as you say, as I say, as you said, that are basically after most of the manuscripts are after the 9th century. The New Testament manuscripts. Those manuscripts are inconsistent with each other, meaning that exactly what you've mentioned has a definition of contradiction.
Can you define what you understand by inconsistent? Is one saying that Jesus said, let's say for example, let's pick on John. Let's say for example in the Gospel of John, when Thomas says to Jesus, my Lord and my God. Yeah. Are you saying that if we look at all the manuscripts that we have of the Gospel of John from the 9th century, after 9th century, from before, right? Because we've got fragments.
No, you've asked me a scholarly question.
No.
That's a scholarly question.
I'm not a scholar.
Yes, you've asked me a scholarly question. So for me to answer that, I'd have to have full understanding of the discourse.
No, I'm not asking.
That's one specific verse.
Yeah, well, I'm using it as an example. Yeah. So what you're saying is that these inconsistencies would be, for example, that some manuscripts say my Lord and my healer, my Lord and my brother. So that would be an inconsistency.
Of course it is. Right? You just mentioned that James saying yourself Jack or James whatever you call yourself is an inconsistency. I've asked you now, what are you? You say your name is James. If I ask you again, you say Jack, that would be an inconsistency. Now in the same light,
and we can prove that I'm being inconsistent because you can go to my birth certificate, you can look at my passport, you can see my name is David. So
but if they're going against each other, then either what you've got 3 options actually. Actually, you've got 2 options. Sorry. Either one of them is right or both of them are wrong. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Either one of them is right, they can't both be right.
No.
So okay, now you have the problem with the biblical translations. Now you go to forget about the manuscripts now. Forget about Sinaiticus and all of these manuscripts, big manuscripts that are actually you can get them. We're saying that if you go to the average bookstore and you pick up a Bible and you look at the New International Version and compare it with the King James Version, there is no doubt in any human being's mind that you will find inconsistencies in selected verses. That you'll find one translation because they rely on certain manuscripts, because they rely on other manuscripts saying something else. There's no doubt about that in anyone's mind. And if you weren't able to prove that, it could be done so easily. I'm sure you don't need to do that. You know yourself.
What I'm not saying is that there aren't different translations.
That's not translations. If you look at the footnotes of these biblical translations, and if you look at the prefaces of those biblical translations, they reference the different manuscripts that they sometimes rely upon. So they depend upon different manuscripts, and depending upon what manuscripts they depend on, they come to different conclusions as to what the verse is saying. Now, I'm saying to you that's called inconsistency. Are you saying then, for example, if one says Jesus and another says Jesus Christ, but that's an inconsistency? No, for me, that's not really a great example. No, I wouldn't say that. Because that's what most. There's no contradiction in that.
One will say brothers and one will say brothers.
Yeah, I would say there's no contradiction.
Okay, because that's what most.
A contradiction has to go against, like you said, things that go against each other. There's no contradiction in that.
That's what most of those 400,000 are.
Okay, have you been through We've been through 400,000.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Now I can tell you as a matter of fact.
I'm quite sure that you haven't either. But if you're using that to tell me that I can't.
No, but I haven't either. But I can tell you that I have been through some verses, which, depending upon the manuscript, and you have some verses, as you know, my friend. Like, I don't want to have to mention the first epistle of John 5. I don't have to mention these things that are actually corruptions of the Bible, meaning that were added later on. So people at one time, Christian people, read the verse, believed it was part of the Bible, and then later on it was discovered that it wasn't.
Right, perfect, right? The longer ending of Mark, they read it and they believed it.
Yes.
The quicker pay adultery, right?
Adultery.
Yeah.
That's John.
Yeah, where the woman caught in adultery, right? They read that, they believed it, right? Let's say the passage in John that says it's got the Trinity in it, in the King James, in the King James version, right? They read that, they believed it.
Yes.
What is different about those Christians' faith to mine? What's different?
I see your point.
Yeah. So even though we do have these, and no one's denying that.
Okay, there's lots of issues, my friend. There's so many issues. That, okay, let me one example. Right? One example is that in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse number 7. That's either 7 or 17. Forget now. But Jesus Christ says that I have not come to do away with the prophets of the Lord, that have come to fulfill them. Yeah. There's a discussion, as you know, within Christian circles. What did Jesus mean when he said, I've come to fulfill the law? I have not come to do away with it. Okay. Now, if you look at let's use the exact example that you gave. The example of the adultery, as in the book of John, the book of John, in the final verse of the book of John, where, just for the viewers' attention, what happened was, there was a case. Jesus Christ was there, and in obviously Mosaic law, in Old Testament literature, you find that the adulterer gets stoned to death. Yeah. So basically, what it is that Jesus Christ came. There was someone who had done adultery. Am I correct so far? You can correct me if I'm wrong at any time. And then he was asked to, judge. So Jesus Christ said, let the person with sin let the person without sin cast the first stone. Well, word for word, that's how it is in the Bible, actually. I think it's there in the King James, actually. Yeah? If it's there in the King James, it's actually, that is a biblical fabrication according to the majority of scholars. According to Bruce Mescal. Now, going back to our theological discussion, what did Jesus mean when he said, I've come to fulfill the prophets? Did he mean that, because he said the law or the prophets, I haven't come to it, the law or the prophets. The prophets that came before it came with the idea of one God, but the law is the law of Moses. Yeah? And obviously prophets came with their law. If you read into this verse, and you are someone who wants to understand Christianity, you can say, okay, this verse is a clear example of abrogation of previous law from Jesus Christ. Yes? Because this verse shows that he no longer approves in a full sense of the Mosaic law. However, if you say no, no, actually, this verse is, you say, no, actually, this verse is fabrication. So we go back to our Matthew chapter 5, verse number 17, and we look at it, and we say, actually, this verse doesn't mean that. It means he's fulfilling it by letter and by law. Because he said, no jotto or whatever he said. So he doesn't want anything to go. Can you see the problem? So it raises real jurisprudent and theological issues. And there's the issue of John, because we talk about John, which is not part of, by the way, John is not part of the Synoptic Bible. The Synoptic Bible is Matthew, Mark, Luke, K source, M source, L source, which are not known to the majority of people. John is not part of the Synoptic Bible, which means it came as the latest gospel, which means it's most, from a logical perspective, historical perspective, it's most susceptible to corruption. And that's why you have the most amazing claims in John, especially the ones that Christians used to try and justify, according to Bruce Metzger, by the way, justify the deity of Jesus Christ. They use it all in John. You'll find that most of the things, like John chapter 10, a lot of people use it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, having said that, if you look at John now, there's a verse in John, and I can get the references as well. If some of, actually, let me get the reference, yeah, because I don't want to.
Because we're not disputing with you the fact that we do have these variants.
Yes.
Right? But what we're talking about here, you use the word fabrication, like somebody made it up. I would say, to what point, what's their point in making up something that is in accordance with the way Jesus behaved, and in the rest of the Gospels that we don't have an issue with.
Say that again, sir?
So, for example, the woman caught in adultery. If that was a story that somebody made up that was illustrating the teaching.
So is your question, is that how does it, is your question just in a nutshell, is it, how could it be, it's basically, how does it change your theology? Is that your question?
Yeah, okay. It doesn't.
Okay, so you've answered your own question.
If it doesn't belong in the canon of scripture, we can establish that. We can establish the bits that don't, that was scribal note.
Basically, let me say something, okay?
That entered into the text.
Okay, fine. Let's just do this.
Let's establish that because, and that's why earlier I said that we have a paucity of riches. We've got so many manuscripts that we can actually see.
I'm going to read this word for word.
We can actually see when something shouldn't be there.
Alright, I'm going to read you something word for word.
You can have a.
This is John chapter 7, verse 8 to 10, okay? Because we talk about John.
Yeah.
I'm going to read you, Jesus has said, Jesus' words, okay? He says, go to the feast yourself. I'm not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is the point of the thing. Now, if you look at a commentary, a critical expository and practical commentary of the Gospels of John by John Owen, and you also look at the Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges, among other sources, you'll find that this word "yet" in John chapter number 7, verses 8 to 10. Basically is an interpolation, is a fabrication. This shows us something incredible, right? He says, I'm not coming up to the feast yet. But what happens? Jesus goes up to the feast. If you take away yet out, he says, I'm not going up to the feast, and he goes up to the feast, meaning he lied. Okay, meaning he lied. A lie is when you say something contrary to the truth. Jesus Christ, according to, if we take, because, as we said, I've mentioned two sources, which are academic sources, scholarly sources, which say that the word yet are interpolation. You're saying that there's nothing in the biblical New Testament corpus that basically has any theological implications.
I'm not saying. I'm saying what
you said. Remember what we said before. If you look at over 400,000 examples,
has said it.
Okay, you said before that the 400,000 examples.
Scholars have said that.
Sorry, let me just,
even amongst all those 400,000, there isn't anything.
Okay, I'm saying to you that it has a theological implication. This does. Are you telling me that Jesus Christ not lying does not have the theological implication?
I can't comment on this one because I haven't looked into.
But I've given you the two. Let's.
Okay, you've given me two sources.
Yeah. So what these two academic sources have said about John chapter number 7, verse number 8 to 10, is that Jesus lied. Really, that's what it says. So if you think about it, the word yet is an interpolation, is a fabrication. If that's the case, then here we have an issue.
But then you're saying if that's the case,
It is
which
the
means
case.
it's not conclusive beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, let me rephrase.
So,
it is the case.
I don't know.
So therefore, according to the Bible, New Testament corpus, then Jesus lied. Is that theologically problematic or not? God lied.
If Jesus,
Can God lie?
yeah, no. So I know.
So the Bible is wrong.
You can continue talking about that for the camera, but I don't know. That's not one that I've looked at. So I can't say. I'll take your word for it.
Okay, so what would you do? I mean, do you reject the Bible?
No.
So if the Bible says God lied, you don't reject
But
it.
it doesn't say that.
Okay, so he said he's going to go up to the feast. Yeah? He says he's not going to come to the feast, and then he goes up to the feast. What do you call that? If I say I'm not going to speak to you right now, and I start speaking to you,
Well,
what is it?
you're claiming that there's an interpolated word. Right? Some people are claiming it. Some people, I don't know. Is it?
But I've given you
is there-
academic resources.
Yeah, but
academic.
what is this? Is 100% scholarly consensus of the opinion that it's a lie? No. So
okay,
obviously there's two sides to the story, and I don't know both those sides.
There's clearly no, there's no academic consensus on almost anything that's published.
Exactly. So that's what I said at the beginning.
There's not even a
We're not gonna be
consensus
able
that the first epistle of John chapter 5 verse number 7 is actually interpolated.
Well, why don't we take it like this? In the Jesus that I believe in is God, doesn't lie. Jesus Isa that you believe in would not have told a lie because he was the word and the truth. And
So
obviously there's something going on
with the Bible.
with the transmission, not with the Bible.
Why not?
Because it's
See, why do you want to admit this? Okay.
There's nothing to admit. It's just
I don't understand. I don't get it. Like, because right now you're faced with something in the Bible. Like, let's forget about this, yeah? There are some verses in the Bible which say that God wrestled Jacob and lost him. Okay. Now, the viewer, you might accept that, but I don't accept that. You accept that God had a wrestling match with Jacob and lost?
that's what it says.
I mean, please. I mean, it's things like this which really render for me the Bible an unreadable book. Well, our parts. I'm not saying generally, because that's unfair.
Either you take the whole thing or you reject it.
But you don't even know what you're taking because, as we've just established, without a shadow of any, the original Bible was not preserved.
The original question that we were talking about was what about the Bible convinces me that it's true?
No, but the Bible itself, no, the original question we said, we asked two questions.
And it's clear
What is the Bible?
that you think that I can't do that.
Okay, let me say something.
Exactly. So
based on your testimony today,
your worldview,
your worldview is based on a book that you don't have.
which is based on the Quran,
Yes.
right? The original of which we don't have.
Okay, we do have the original.
So you have.
Okay. Yes. Let me. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Of course we do.
Which one is
All right.
authentic?
I'm very happy with this question. Let me show you now.
Just name the one that is authentic.
I'm sorry if I'm coming across.
No, I have no problem whatsoever. I am learning.
Sorry, man. Do you know what?
This is.
I think I'm getting a bit passionate here. Okay, let me say something, guys. Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna face the camera. Do you mind?
No.
So it's very rude in my religion to do that. You know, the Prophet he used to always turn to people, but because this is an explanation now, because you mentioned something about Islam. So
tell the people about the original Uthmanic manuscripts you've got.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah. So here you have. We've just heard, subhanallah, that the Bible. We just heard about the Bible, and it's basically non-preservation.
No, don't tell me about the Bible. Tell me about
now
the
it's about the
original
Quran.
Uthmanic manuscripts.
Now, as it relates to the Quran, how is it preserved? Where is it preserved?
No. My question was,
Yes, well, that's
I said you don't have original manuscript.
Where is it? You're saying, yeah?
Yeah, so what's its name?
Okay.
Where is it?
Now,
Who's got it?
Yeah,
Where's it kept? We don't have to go into the whole story about
I'm coming to you. Actually, we have more than one. So Uthman al-Affan, when he, because he came, he was the fourth Khalif, yeah? So he's the third Khalif after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ali was the fourth.
Ali was the fourth. So Uthman al-Affan, he was the third Khalif. He actually sent, according to majority scholars, 7 different masahif, of books, to different centers of power. One of them is actually completely preserved according to radiocarbon dating, according to the historical record, in the Mathaf or the museum in Yemen. It's called the Sana'a manuscript. We can Google it up. The Sana'a manuscript in Yemen, which is Sana'a, is the capital of Yemen, is kept, it's letter to letter, word for word, exactly what you would be able to find or pick up from any bookstore. What we have now in the Quran app on your phone stone is exactly what they have. And I've got my sheikh, one of my people that I talked to, again, he was asking me questions. I spoke to him, very expert in this field, because he was an expert. He was granted access to the Mathaf, to the museum. And he came into the Mathaf and he saw the actual book cover to cover from Fatiha to Nas. And you can go there, you can go to Yemen. I know it's a bit problematic right now, but you can go to Yemen to that Mathaf, or you can go online and see the pictures of that Quran, that Mus'haf, which is preserved from Fatiha to Nas. And he even saw, the Sheikh, he even saw, you know, because basically we have in our tradition, Uthman ibn Affan, he died, yeah, he was killed by the Khawarij, by a group called Khawarij. When he was killed, he was reading the Quran. And in the narration, it said that when he was killed, the blood splattered, subhanAllah, on a part of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 2, yeah, where it says, فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهِ. So Allah is enough for you over them. Yeah. One word, subhanAllah, but it has so much meaning. This word, the blood of Uthman, basically splattered on this section of the Quran. When the Shaykh went, and you can go there, you can check it up yourself, the blood was even still intact. The blood was even still intact. So not only do we have, and by the way, even if we threw away that manuscript, we threw it in the sea, we have not only, and this is a very important point, we not only have a written testimonial or written record of the Quran, the Mus'haf, with us, but we have what we call the exegesis works, written by different exegetes, that basically describe the Quran in major detail. So you've got that, and you've also got the oral transmission. And if you wanted to go for an academic resource, you can go to something that's written by Ibn Jazari called Tabaqat al-Qurra, where he references literally tens of people who had memorized the same Quran on each chain of narration. Now the Quran is not allowed to be read just by the book. It's not allowed to be read like that. The Quran is three things, according to Ibn Jazari in his kitab, in his book called Tayyibatul Nashr, which is the main, the seminal work. He said that the Quran has to fulfill three criteria in order to be called the Quran. One criteria is that you have to have a book, and we have the book. We have them in Turkey. There's another manuscript in Turkey. We have them.
Those ones with Mani.
No, Uthman.
Well, Syed Al-College, the Muslim scholars that have looked at it says
that's Uthmani. Look, the one in
the scholars that have looked at it.
Who's the scholar?
Syed Al-College.
He's not a scholar. I don't know who's he. For us, the scholars are very well.
He's a Muslim. He's a Turkish Muslim scholar.
I don't know. I haven't heard of him. I haven't heard of him. I'm not. When I say scholars, I'm talking about classical scholars like Ibn Jazari. There's no one going to mess around with people like Ibn Jazari. Ibn Jazari is basically, if you wanted to, like, we have to respect the fact that every field has its well-known scholars that everyone agrees with, and then you have people that are contemporaries.
He and his colleague were granted access to it, so they couldn't have been nobody.
By the way, sorry. People, in order to judge if something is Uthmani or not Uthmani, they have to have a specialist knowledge of something called Rasm al-Mus'haf. Rasm al-Mus'haf is basically how the font of, or how the Quran is actually written. Yeah, it's not calligraphy, but it's just like the font
style of writing.
Yeah. Now, in order to have a knowledge of Rasm al-Mushaf, you have to, first of all, you have to show us that you have memorized the Quran in the 10 qira'at, and that you have been able to have very strong memory in that, and that you basically know all of what you call the mutun, which are the poetries that are associated with it. You have to memorize poetries. Like, for example, let me give you one poetry. One poetry is Ibn Jazari himself writes called Al-Jazariyya. Then you have a Shatibi, Ad-Durra. All of these are poetries that, in order for you to know about the Quran and to deem it either Uthmani or not Uthmani, you have to know it. Like, for example, Ibn Jazari says, Al-Akhdhu bil-Tajweed, Bab al-Tajweed. Al-Akhdhu bil-Tajweed, Hatm lazimu min lam yujawid al-Quran athimu li'annahu ilayhi anzala. There are poetries that are actually put in place. So for someone to be called a scholar, they have to meet certain requirements that basically...
I'm sure that the people who hold the top copy manuscript would not have allowed someone who wasn't a fully qualified scholar, because I've seen
the academics the academics in their own capacity. I'm not taking that away from them. I don't want to be taking that away from them. But when we say scholar, Islamic scholar of this particular field,
so there's certain scholars are permissible and others aren't.
No, I'm saying that from our perspective, okay, because this is Islamic knowledge. From our perspective, when we're talking about the Islamic scholars, okay, who understand the chains of narration, okay, like I've given you a scholarly reference in Arabic. It's not even in English. You can't even open it if you read it in Arabic. So I'm saying to you that what I'm saying to you is that we just to summarize. Sorry, that you've got three different things. How do we know the Quran is preserved? We've got the Mus'haf, that's one. We've got the chain of narration, oral narration. Now what that means to say is that at every level there's mass, and the Quran is mutawatir, meaning there's mass narration on each level. So it's not just one person who memorized the Quran. They memorized the Quran with a teacher, they saw the actual physical Quran, and there were more than one person on every level of every generation. Yeah. When you couple that with the third thing that you need to triangulate it with, which is basically that the Quran is basically in line with the Al-Arabiya Fusha, which is the Arabic language, then you have a triangulation of three different things. That's why I make the claim confidently that the Quran is the most preserved document or the most preserved speech in human history of that age, because no other speech, yes, no other speech has or people of or any other historical tradition have gone to such lengths to ensure preservation of the book. And if the Christians had done what the Muslims have done, then your book would have been preserved. Simple thing.
Well, I know our history.
Quick. Yeah, because it's just a one-on-one. Yeah.
To respect peace.
That's right, that's what we're trying to do.
Christianity.
Thank you very much, yeah, that's correct.
All human beings.
That's right, my friend.
Why Christian people hate Prophet Muhammad?
Yeah, okay.
That's my question.
Yeah, okay. I like that one.
Thank you.
Anyways, any questions? So now we've been able to establish, I have been able with academic references to show you that the Bible is not preserved and the Quran is preserved.
No, you've attempted to do that.
Okay, I've done it. I think the people will obviously know that.
You haven't.
The Quran has no inconsistency. It's no basically you can never find two versions of the Quran which are contradictory with each other, something like that. But with the Bible, that's easily found, and we've done that today, and you have no answer for it. That's basically it. So I ask you now, why do you depend upon the book?
This is great argumentation. Right? I have one. You haven't.
No, but I'm just. No, it's not like that. I actually gave you so many references.
You're okay. One reference I'm not clear on.
Go on.
Who are the scholars that have attested to the Uthmanic nature of the Sana manuscript?
Every single scholar of the fen. Meaning of the.
You can give me lots of scholars when it comes to the Bible. Metzger, Oman. Just give me a name that I can Google so I can look up their research.
You can't look up their research. It's all in Arabic. The scholars of the Quran write in Arabic.
I know people who speak Arabic, so I can say.
Okay. So basically, the Sana'a manuscript.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a good question. All right, let's answer it. So let's answer it. Okay. How do we know something is what in Arabic is called yuwafiq rasm al-Uthmani, meaning it's in line
hopefully
with the font of Uthman.
And then if you just say the name.
No, I'm gonna tell you.
Of the scholars.
I'm going to tell you. Yeah? So if you look in the back of any Mus'haf is a Quranic copy. Usually the majority of them today that are in the world are published by either Saudi Arabia or Egypt. Yeah. In Egypt, the scholars that I have personally met, actually, and that have, obviously they accept that the Sana'a manuscript is someone like Asim al-Mahsarawi, and he puts his name in the back of the Mus'haf. His name is in the back of the Mus'haf. So you talk about present day scholars, yeah? He's one person.
Yeah.
They
were discovered all that long
basically
ago.
what it is there's committees, yeah? There are committees in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia and in other countries, other centers of Islamic power in Morocco, I think there's one. That basically they come together and they analyze any Quran and they compare it to the manuscript that we have, and we say, does this manuscript yuwafiq al-rasm al-Uthmani or la? Does this manuscript, does it go in line with the font of Uthman or does it not?
Yeah.
So based on the principles, and there is a whole fen, which is a science called Rasm al-Mushaf, yeah, which means it's the font of the Mushaf. If the writing is not spelled exactly the same as how it's meant to be spelled, basically silent letters and something like that in Arabic as well. Even if it's not spelled with those silent letters, then it would not be in line with the Rasm al-Ahmad. And so these committees come together and they conclude that this book is, yeah, it's fine, it's not right. You see how that works? Yeah. So in Egypt, there's one scholar that, alhamdulillah, he comes to us, his name is Aisam Masala, he puts his stuff, he's part of the Egyptian type Muslims. So that's one present day scholar, you can talk to him if you want to, you can speak Arabic. You know, and the institutes, there's two institutes that are in London nowadays, alhamdulillah, that deal with what we call the Qira'at of the Quran and the specialism of the Quran. One of them is called the Shatibi Institute, which is in Muntada Islami. Another one is called Reading Ascend, which is actually on Sirat Education, which is my YouTube channel. You can go to, it's one of the featured channels, it's called Read and Ascend. And you can learn the Quran there. Become Muslim. Sorry.
Yeah.
You want to hear? Alright, okay.
I don't not become Muslim. You snuck that in afterwards. Right. Can I read you the quote from, I found it. Right. This is Bart Ehrman, page 252 of Misquoting Jesus. If he and I were put in a room and asked to, I think he's talking about him and Metzger. If he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out a consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe one or two dozen places out of many thousands. The position I argue for in Misquoting Jesus does not actually stand at odds with Professor Metzger's position that the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscripts tradition of the New Testament. So that shows that he doesn't agree that the position that you were stating, that Bart Ehrman says that the text of the New Testament is not reliable.
Of course he believes that.
That's what he says.
Oh, come on. Guys, okay.
I'm sorry, that's a quote from his book.
Bruce Metzger has his own YouTube channel, okay? I'm gonna promote him now, okay? He's not Muslim, but I'm gonna promote him. Go on YouTube, write Bruce Metzger, watch any of his lectures, and tell me that if your conclusion is that Bruce Metzger, not Bruce Metzger, he doesn't have his Bart Ehrman has his own YouTube channel. Go on his channel, watch any of his lectures, and tell me if you believe, that he thinks that the Bible is preserved.
I know.
Okay,
I just read his words.
No, that's fine. These guys are clever, okay? These guys, not all of them are clever. Some of you are clever. You go on YouTube, all right? Write Bart Ehrman on YouTube.
Read Misquoting Jesus, page 252, where Bart Ehrman says that he will not dispute with Bruce Metzger the reliability of the New Testament manuscript.
Yeah, because they both believe in the same level of inconsistency. That's what he means.
No.
Both of them have the same opinion that it's inconsistent.
No, he's saying that.
Come on, man. What's Bruce Metzger's book called? Bible Restoration, Corruption, and this and that. Come on, man. It's crazy, man.
That the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament.
Okay, yeah.
Essential Christian beliefs are not affected.
The essential, it depends, okay, these are subjective terms. Depends on how you say this. It depends really on how you define essential Christian beliefs. Actually,
you defined them for me at the beginning when you were talking about the Trinity.
Okay, if you accept that as the Trinity, then I would say the Trinity is very rarely, it's not even mentioned in the Bible.
No, the word Trinity is not used, just like the word Tawhid is not mentioned. But Tawhid is...
Tawhid is always equal master. Yeah, in Arabic language, it's a gerund. It's a gerund.
Yeah, it's a complex notion of that. It's about the essence, by the way, attributes of God.
Tawhid is mentioned in the Hadith. You know that?
Yeah, but I don't need external
that's one.
200-year later traditions to help explain my text. My text is...
That tradition in Bukhari, everything has got a chain, like I said, you've got a chain back to the Prophet, and those chains, by the way, a lot of people think that because when we clarify misconceptions, a lot of people think that sorry, I'm so sorry. I think I'm being a bit.
No, we're getting into it, man.
Okay, good. So I was going to say that a lot of people think that the hadith are Chinese resources and that. A lot of people don't understand.
Because a lot of them were.
But do you mind if I tell you something?
Yeah.
Because this is a very deep knowledge. I'm not saying I understand it all, because it's a very deep knowledge. But basically the hadith, for a hadith to be authentic, there has to, for the most part, it has to fulfill 6 conditions. Yeah, one of them is called. It's got to have strong dabt. Dabt is it means it has to be written well or it has to be memorized well. Now, in other words, if we say that if the chains of Bukhari and Muslim, we say for the most part there are some weak hadiths in Muslim. There are some weak hadiths in Muslim, yeah. But for the most part, the chains in Bukhari and Muslim are completely strong, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, basically what we say is that a lot of people think because it's compiled 200 years later, it's compiled that it was written that time. No, it was written way before. It was around, but it was compiled at that time. And basically, the Bukhari and Muslim, they don't accept the hadith that are not written properly. So they had to be written, documented properly, and they had to come from reliable source.
And that were obvious forgeries that people had made up.
There's so many forgeries in hadith.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
For Mawdu' hadith, we have a whole section on that. Mawdu' hadith, Munkar hadith. Yeah, absolutely. Those forgeries are sifted away. Do you know how many hadiths there are? There are literally hundreds of thousands of hadiths.
I think it was like 700,000,
There's 400. There's literally hundreds of thousands of hadith. Now you might be thinking, how is that the case? There are hundreds of thousands of hadith. And Nawawi says, and Al-Dhahabi says, two hadith scholars, probably the two of the biggest names in hadith, and Nawawi and Al-Dhahabi, they both say that of that, in their estimation, there are about 10,000 strong hadith. Altogether, if you put all the strong hadith together with singular chains, there are about 10,000 hadith. So of the hundreds of thousands of hadith that we've got of different chains of narration, sometimes it can be the same hadith but with different chains, you've got 10,000 which are strong. So that shows, according to that there is an incredible filtration process. Incredible filtration process. So yes, there are some forgeries.
Because now that just strikes me as curious. You say we've got all these tens of thousands of hadith, and that's good. But when I say we've got tens of thousands of manuscripts,
yes.
That's bad.
Let me answer that, yeah?
Right?
Because we reject the hadith that are not strong. That's how we deal with them. So they're not our religion. But for you can't reject it because you don't know if it's true or not. We have a system, a methodology of knowing if a hadith is strong or not. You guys don't have a system, unfortunately. So that's the problem.
We do have a system. It's called the open transmission of the text.
Okay, I'm saying to you,
if you were Matthew and you wrote something and you sent it to me and then I copied it and I copied it out a couple of times and I sent it to her and I sent it to him, right? And then that happens over hundreds of years, over most of the known world, all the way from Spain across to Asia Minor.
Yes, right? let me tell you our challenge.
Okay. 2,000 years later, you and I come along, we collect those, we look at them, and they are agreeing, like the quote I just read.
They disagree.
No,
let me say something.
No, I've just read the quote to you.
Okay.
Right?
The quote is
essential Christian doctrine,
misused.
there is no.
So did Jesus lie or not?
Did I just lie?
No, did Jesus lie?
No.
So okay, look.
You don't believe he lied. I don't believe.
Okay, so there are some translations that suggest that he did, as we know. Now, going back to what you said about hadith. The Quran says in chapter number 4, verse number 82, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Do not look over the Quran with care, for if it had been from other than God, then I would have many contradictions. Now, I'm saying to you, the Quran makes a challenge about itself. The hadith, I've admitted to you, there are so many hadiths that are munkar, unauthentic, we don't accept them. Yeah. So the challenge of the Quran is not a challenge which you can take to the hadith. But say, look, you've got your unpreserved hadith, or the hadith is inauthentic, not authentic. So yeah, you agree. So the point is, the whole idea is that we are not saying that all of the hadith we accept. There are some hadith we don't accept. They're not religion for us. They are made up. We accept that. They're not historically sound. So I think here, and you know, I genuinely, this is a challenge. Yeah?
I think I'm going to stop raining pretty much.
A munkar hadith, or Mawdu' hadith, which is a fabricated, not a weak hadith, has a stronger chain of provenance than any of the biblical manuscripts. That's my challenge.
I know. I would say that
you have no gospel with a chain of provenance going back to Jesus Christ. Unfortunately.
Why do you say that?
Yeah, that's the way it is.
Okay. Who was Mark?
You tell me. No one knows who he is. A pen name.
Well, no.
Pseudonym.
No, it's not.
Who's Mark?
Mark was the person who wrote down what Peter was preaching. Scholars say that, not me.
Okay, Peter was Simon, yeah? Peter was Simon, the same person, yeah? Petros.
Yeah.
Means rocks.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you tell me something, I'm not saying something, yeah? If you're saying that scholars say that, Now, is there an agreement? Is there an agreement?
You said you won't get 100% consensus, so we can't use that.
Yeah, so genuinely speaking, no one knows who these people are. If you look at the scholarly
I'm just
work,
saying
no one knows who they are.
that.
Matthew, Martin Luther John, we don't know who they are. That's the issue. Do you know what we have, my friend? Let me tell you something.
That's a really interesting point.
Can I tell you something? I want to tell the viewers something. Interesting.
All the Gospels that are known as
Is it Maghrib time? Sorry. Is it Maghrib time? Is it? Alright, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm going to...
Okay, just to say, all the Gospels that claim to be written by the apostles, we know are much later and forgeries and stuff like that. Yes. Why then, if you're trying to establish a faith, would you name something after someone who's unknown? Exactly my point.
So what's his name?
Yeah. So why would you call it the Gospel of Mark when Mark is a nobody if it wasn't Mark that wrote it? Mark was associated with Peter.
It's a pen name. It's a pseudo name. Basically, do you know how we work? Okay, in the Hadith sciences, it's very interesting, yeah? Because in the Hadith sciences, we have something called Jarh Ta'dil. It's also called Ilm Rijal. It's the same thing. Jarh Ta'dil and Ilm Rijal is the idea that everybody in the chain of narration, we know who they are. We know who they are. We know their first name, their surname, who their father was, who their great-grandfather, who their great-great-great-grandfather was, who their mother was. You know what I'm saying? We know where they lived. We know what geographic location they were. We know everything about them. We don't accept history from pen names or people that have just singular names. We have to know everything about the individual in order for them to be transmittable, if you will. So that is, if you look at any chain of any authentic hadith, it has to have a what you call a muttasil chain, which means it's a complete chain, no chinks in between, of people who are trustworthy individuals, and we know everything about them. So they're not known to lie, they have bad memory, they're not known to write things incorrectly. You know, even if you implement that standard in the academic world today, a lot of your history will be gone. Like, for example, if we had to say that for us to accept valid history from someone, they have to be able to write things properly, or I have to have good memory, yeah, in order for them to narrate witness testimonies. Then I would say a lot of 15th, 16th, 13th century history will be finished. Gone.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about ancient manuscripts.
Exactly. So if you apply the Islamic standard to history will be finished. A big chunk of history will be like, get out of it.
I haven't gotten into looking at the chains of narration, right? So I can't. Some of the dates are quite stretched, but that's
these are just like speculative things. We have to come with academic things. Here I'm telling you that basically there's no dates that are stretched. But if the dates are stretched, it will be. By the way, that's an interesting point. If we know, and that's an interesting point, if we know that somebody didn't exist at that time, or that they didn't come and meet the Prophet at that time, then we don't accept hadith from them, but we don't accept Quran. We have such a system that if people understood this system, they'd have no doubt whatsoever of the preservation of either the strong, authentic hadith or the Quran at all.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. There's a lot more to talk about that.
I'm going to go and pray now.
Cool.
Alright, inshallah. Right, yalla.
To see more videos like this, subscribe to Titans TV down below. Thanks.
The greatest darky that bite with shark teeth and hate malarkey. Who you? The greatest heartbeat. Ancient Egypt is a
Okay, good. So now learn. Now learn.
So majority.
Now learn. If you want to learn, let me speak now.
Okay, but my question.
Now learn.
Can I give you my question first? So, how many Christians are there? So you need the quantity to find out what the percentage
We have no idea.
Because you don't even understand that racism is a subconscious conversation that's going on in everyone's brain right now, bro. You don't even understand.
I think it's a conscious. I think it's conscious.
That is why you went to
the table, mate.
And we're like, oh no, it wasn't actually racist.
Okay, when
because there's a subconscious conversation already going on, bro.
No, a delusion is believing in something which is contrary to overwhelming evidence against it.
Cause and effect, reaction, action only applies to things made of matter. Yes? Only applies to things made of matter. It doesn't apply to consciousness, because consciousness is eternal and it has all possibilities. The same way how your imagination has all possibilities. You're only restricted by your physical body to carry out those imaginations. Yes? Are you in agreement on that?
That has been there always. Which I'm saying, okay, I'm made of energy, no problem. That doesn't prove to me that this energy that has no will is my claim, and I want you to disprove it. Exactly. The energy doesn't have a will? No, sir. Does it have consciousness? No, sir. Does it have rationality? No, sir. What do you mean? I'm going to come in. I'm going to give you time. Now, the absence of will, the absence of consciousness, the absence of rationality. How does it bring a being like my friend here, who's a bit rational, has a will, and has consciousness? Please answer.